Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to learn Torah. And I hope everyone is managing well and finding the silver linings in this new normal or new reality. And so Erev Tov, and again, hope everyone is safe and healthy and managing as best as possible. And so let's draw strength and inspiration from Pirkei Avot and from our tradition. Just a quick shout out for Pirkei Avot, which is that, today is Lag BaOmer. And so it's not only important that a person can get a haircut on Lag BaOmer and everyone looks great, whether or not you got a haircut, but the Gemara says that the reason why the students of Rabbi Akiva passed away was because they didn't show proper respect to one another. And so perhaps on Lag BaOmer, which is the day that they stopped dying when the Jewish people started turning it around, so it's a day not just that we're allowed to get a haircut and the mourning restrictions have ended, but it's really a time where we try to turn things around in the area of Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. And certainly Pirkei Avot is an important sefer to learn to strengthen our commitment to showing proper kavod Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, between one and the other. But Pirkei Avot relates to our relationship with others, but also our relationship with Hashem. So we're going to learn this week Perek Hey, because that's the week that's the Perek that many around the world are learning this week and on Shabbat. And again, we learn the 6 prakim of Pirkei Avot between Pesach and Shavuot because we're climbing the mountain. We're trying to prepare ourselves and strengthen our character to be ready for the receiving of the Torah on Shavuot. And so, even if you didn't, I think many of you did attend last week, but even if you didn't attend last week, this year is independent, and we're going to be learning Perek Hey of Pirkei Avot. Now, before I share my screen with you, if you have a Pirkei Avot, that's great, but I do have it on a document that I will share with you. Hopefully that'll work. But to understand the format of Perek Hey, and I wanted to give brief words of introduction. As you know, so there are 2 dimensions of Torah. We have the Torah Shebechsav, which consists of the 5 books of Torah, which has the highest status. But Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah, also includes the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim, right? The prophets and the writings. And then we have the second dimension of Torah that a Torah Jew is committed to, which is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law. There is no way to understand the written Torah without the oral law, right? A Jew has to subscribe and has to be committed to the written Torah and the oral law. And the oral law is now recorded, of course, in the 6 volumes of the Mishnah and Gemara, right? We talk about finishing Shas, right? What does Shas stand for? Shas stands for Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. So if a person says they finish Shas, that's an incredible accomplishment, that they finish the 6 volumes that sort of contain the whole corpus of the oral law. Now, when a person says they finish Shas, so it could mean that they finished the 6 volumes of Mishnah, which is a great accomplishment, or that they can say, or it could be that they finished the 6 volumes of Gemara, which includes the Mishnah. So it's an even greater, it takes an even longer amount of time, much longer, to learn the 6 volumes of Mishnah and Gemara. Now, initially, the oral law was not intended to be written down, and the written law was not intended to be said orally. That's actually a halacha that's mentioned in the Gemara, that the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, when it's read in shul or in general, it's supposed to be read from the text, and you're not supposed to just say it by heart. But with regard to the oral law, the opposite law is in effect, which is that it's supposed to remain as oral law, transmitted, analyzed, discussed, orally, transmitted from generation to generation. 100 years after the Churban, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, so you had Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who saw that the Jewish people were dispersed in exile, and he recognized the inability of the Jews to learn and transmit the entirety of the Torah to the next generation. And he was concerned that there would be a break in the link in the chain of transmission. We didn't have the Sitzfleisch. We maybe didn't have the endurance like we once had. And so Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi decided to do something very radical, very revolutionary, which was that he decided to write down the oral law. He based himself on a pasuk, Eis lasos laHashem, heiferu torasecha. That there are times that you have to act on behalf of God, heiferu torasecha, either when his Torah is being violated. Another interpretation could be, and this is the application to what Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did, was Eis lasos laHashem, there's a time that you have to act for Hashem and do something radical, even if heiferu torasecha, if it involves something that is considered a breaking of the law. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi broke the law to preserve the law. He broke the law by taking the oral law and putting it into writing, and he wrote the 6 volumes of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is known also as Rebbe, is the author of the Mishnah, and so he broke the law by writing it down, but of course he did it for a greater good of preserving the law, of helping people remember it, to learn it, and to transmit it to the next generation. That's why, by the way, the Mishnah is very cryptic. It's very hard to understand. Sometimes the Gemara will have a whole discussion and say, oh, the Mishnah was talking about this case, it was not talking about that case. So then why did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi say that in the Mishnah? The answer is because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi wrote it down to help us remember it, but he wanted to preserve the necessity for this. He wanted to preserve the necessity of talking about it, of analyzing it, of discussing it, of transmitting it from Rebbe to Talmud, from people to people, chaver to chaver, to transmit it to the next generation. However, before this revolution, the rabbis had to think of creative ways to remember the Torah. And even when the Torah and the Mishnah is written down, still we need creative ways, right, to remember the teachings of the rabbis, of both the written laws, the Torah laws, the rabbinic laws, the written Torah, the oral law. It's a misconception. The oral law is not rabbinic. They're right. The written Torah and the oral law are both biblical, but it's just that the oral law does. I don't want to get bogged down into this, but there's a lot of the oral law that is biblical. It was the way the rabbis understood a tradition going all the way back to Sinai. Then you have some elements of the Torah Shabbat Peh that are rabbinic, right? That the rabbis made fences and restrictions that they added to protect the Torah law. But leaving that aside for the moment, certainly before the revolution of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the rabbis had to think of creative ways to remember the Torah. And so Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, in his introduction to this chapter, chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot, that one of the ways they made sure to recall the teachings was through mnemonics. And in the Gemara, for those of you who've learned Gemara, you know that there's many mnemonics that the rabbis give. They'll either use an acronym to kind of indicate the next 6 items that are going to be discussed. They might use an acronym to remember the 6 differences. For example, Shmini Atzeret. The Gemara says that Shmini Atzeret is part and parcel of Sukkot, but it's also considered an independent holiday. And it's considered a regel b'fnei atzmo, an independent holiday, in 6 different respects. And the rabbis gave a mnemonic to remember those 6 different items. Pezer Keshav. I'm not going to get into what those 6 letters stand for. You could do your own research. We'll talk about it maybe when we get closer to Sukkot. But the rabbis gave a mnemonic, Pezer Keshav, as a way of remembering the 6 ways that Shmini Atzeret is an independent holiday separate from Sukkot. And the Gemara in Eruvin says, Ein Torah nikneit ela b'simanim, that the Torah can be really acquired and remembered when you use mnemonics and these memory devices. So that's just interesting that the rabbis were very, very excited about using mnemonics to remember the teachings. And especially before the oral law was written down, it was very hard to remember everything and to transmit it comprehensively. So in this perek of Perek Hey, of Pirkei Avot, the perek is formatted based on a certain mnemonic. And the mnemonic that it's formatted on and that it's based on is the mnemonic of numbers. All right, so that there's 4 chapters to this perek. And what I'll try to do now is I'll try to share the screen. And And in this perek, so hopefully you could, let's see it over here. So if you see on the screen, you have here the first paragraph is Mishnah Aleph, and then you have Mishnah Bet, Mishnah Gimel. So the first, now the Mishnayot of Pirkei Avot are sometimes broken up in different ways depending on your edition. So it can be a little confusing sometimes. And even the edition that I used to prepare this year is different than the edition that I copied and pasted into this document. So it's a little tricky sometimes. I mean, in other words, it breaks up the Mishnayot in different ways. But if you notice, the first 6 Mishnayot all
Rabbi,
begin with the
not
word.
on yet. Slicha.
Yeah.
It's not on the screen yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you see it now?
No, we don't see it.
Okay, so hold on a second. Let me try it again. I wanted to make sure you guys were listening. How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
See it.
Wonderful. So you're listening, and Baruch Hashem, I'm able to share the screen properly this time. So if you see the first 6 Mishnayot, it all starts with Asara. Asara ma'amorot nivra olam, with 10 sayings, with 10 utterances, the world was created. Asara dorot me Adam v'ad Noach. There are 10 generations from Adam until Noach. Asara nisyonot nisnasa Avram Avinu. Avram was tested with 10 different tests. Asara nisim, 10 miracles were done to our ancestors in Egypt. Asara nisim, we're in the Beis Hamikdash with 10 miracles. So the first 6 Mishnayot don't necessarily have any fundamental intrinsic connection to one another. They discuss different topics. Some of them are a little bit connected, but they discuss really 10 different topics. But the rabbi strung them together in this perek because they all relate to the number 10. And so this is a mnemonic. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau points out that this was a mnemonic that the rabbis used to remember the oral law. And so they said, oh, there's 10 of this, and 10 of this, and 10 of this, and 10 of this, and 10 of this. And it was a way of kind of remembering the laws. And so when they discussed the 10 utterances with which the world was created, then they said, oh, there are 10 generations from Adam to Noach. And then they said, oh, there were 10 miracles done in Mitzrayim. And then there were 10 miracles in the Beis Hamikdash. And there were 10 things that were created here. And then you have, so the first section of the perek revolves around the number 10. The next 2 Mishnayot, which I have on the screen there, relate to the number 7, right? You see that there? Shiva Dvarim Bagolam, Shiva Mine Peronios. So these 2 Mishnayot relate to the number 7. Then you have Mishnah Tet is a continuation of Mishnah Chet, really. Then you have the number 4. All right, so Mishnayot Yud through Tet Vav all relate to the number 4. There are 4 character traits with a person. There are those who say, what is mine, and what is yours is yours. What is mine is yours, what is yours is mine, etc. Right? Well-known Mishnah. Then you have 4 types of personalities. You have 4 types of students, 4 types of giving of tzedakah. So what I'm sharing with you is something that I read from Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, which is interesting, that to understand this perek, you have to understand that it's formatted in a way of using these categories of numbers. You have first a discussion of different things relating to the number of 10, then to the number of 7, then to the number of 4, and then after that, you have a number of Mishnayot that begin with the word kol. Kol. Okay, and then you have a couple, at the end, just add-ons at the very end. All right. So certainly then it was important to have these mnemonics. There wasn't necessarily a fundamental intrinsic connection between the Mishnayot, but even nowadays, when we have things written down, hey, this is cool. We can remember all the different things that relate to the number 10. Oh, now let's talk about the different things that relate to the number 7. And then let's talk about the things that are for, and so forth. Let's jump back now to with that introduction, let's go back to the first Mishnah. It says, Bi'asara ma'amarot nivra olam. With 10 utterances, the world was created. Uma Talmud lomar. Okay, so what does that mean that with 10 utterances, the world was created? So if you look through chapter 1 of creation, you'll find Vayomer Elokim, which is God stating about creation. You see that a total of 9 times. You see that 9 times. And then the word Bereshit is also considered a mamar, is also considered an utterance. And the reason for this is that since there was nothing, it must have been that it was done with God's declaration. When it says Bereshit bara Elokim, it must have been done with God's utterance because there was nothing there. And indeed, the pasuk in Tehillim says, Bidvar Hashem, with the word of Hashem, Shamayim Nasu, the heaven was created. All right, so the rabbis understood Bereshit as 1, and then you have another 9 Vayomers during the course of the first chapter of creation. Why was it necessary? The main question of the Mishnah is, why was it necessary for Hashem to express 10 different utterances? What, couldn't God get it, make one declaration and create the entire world? And that's really the question of this Mishnah. It could have been created with one utterance. So that's the question, and this question is understood in 2 different ways by the commentaries. By Machzor Vitri, which are the teachings of Rashi, he says that the question of the Mishnah is essentially that God could have said, let the whole world be created according to my will. According to the Rambam understands it differently. He just says, why do you need an utterance for every single part of creation? It could have just simply said one utterance, and God could have said, Vayomer Elokim, God said, Yehi, there shall be, Shamayim, heaven, Va'aretz, and the land, and the light, and the vegetation, and the sun and the moon, and the fish, and the birds. Why not there just be one declaration and one utterance from Hashem to create the entirety of the world? That's the essential question of the opening Mishnah of chapter 5. Ela lihipare min harashayim. The purpose, the reason why Hashem used 10 utterances is to punish the wicked. Shema avdem es olam sheniver bi'asar mamaros. The reason for the 10 utterances is to exact punishment from the wicked who corrupt the world that was created with 10 sayings. V'litein tzchar tov letzadikim, and it's to give reward for the righteous who sustain the world, who preserve the world, who keep the world going. Shenivra bi'asar mamaros, that was again created with 10 utterances. What is the Mishnah really teaching us? What's going on here? What is the Mishnah really trying to say? Any thoughts from the crowd here? What is the Mishnah really trying to say over here? Why was it necessary for there to be 10 utterances? So it was to punish the wicked and it was to give reward for the righteous. What's going on here?
Rabbi?
Yep.
Could it be to show that each thing is a separate? In other words, you do one bad thing and then there is a punishment, and you do one bad, or vice versa, you do one good thing and then there is a reward. Each item is separate and therefore it needs to be in 10.
So meaning basically that human action is very diversified.
Yes.
And that you're rewarded, for every good deed, and you're punished, of course, for every aveira. So it's not just like, are you doing good in your life or are you doing bad in your life, but it's more dependent upon every specific decision and action people take. I like that idea. They're very nice.
Okay.
But I'd like to suggest, and based on Rabbi Stromeyer Lau and others, here we go. I got a comment from the crowd. So maybe it's to teach us the value in details. And I think that's a little bit along the lines of what Ayala is saying, but with a new nuance. Avi, I love that answer, which is that we care about foundational principles, but also the devil is in the details, as they say, and that a Jew has to care about the specifics as well. And there's a cute story. About a rabbi who was a student asked the rabbi and said, "Rabbi, why is it necessary to have all the details of Shabbat and Kashrut? Does God really care about all the specific details about keeping kosher and Shabbos and all, the specific laws?" And so the rabbi, didn't respond to the email. It was an email. 2 weeks later, the student wrote back and said, "Rabbi, you didn't respond to me." And the rabbi said, "Yes, I responded to you, but I used this particular email address, and the email address was off by 1 letter, or it didn't have the period in the email address." And the student said, "Rabbi, you misspelled the email address that I gave you to communicate with me. You didn't include the period there, but between the Baruch Sherman, it wasn't. You didn't include the period there." And the rabbi said, "What's the big difference? What's the big deal? I assumed it was close enough." And of course, the student got the message that just like with emails, every little period makes a difference. And in construction, and in design, and in computers, and in life, right? Every single detail makes a difference. So too when it comes to our actions and the halachos. So Ayala and Avi, beautiful answers. I like that answer. Let me suggest an additional idea. Unless Miriam, you wanted to say something?
No, it's okay. I was just thinking that to make the Shabbat so significant and so important in our lives, he has to sort of lead up to it. Rather than kind of lump things together, he needs to divide each day, like make it dramatic, as the 6th day is leading at last to the day of rest in which he stopped.
Very nice. So it's things are building upon one another, leading, and they're foundational blocks, and then you build upon that, and the creation develops, and then we reach Shabbat at the end of creation, at the end of our week. Let me suggest
may I make a comment?
Yes, that's Rivki. I don't see you, but I hear you.
Okay, Baruch Hashem, you can't see me. Okay, so my comment, it's a little bit like in the Pesach Seder Dayenu, that each one of these mamarot are important in their own right. That although they're connected to the entire creation of the world, if each one it's in its own right important. Like in Dayenu, you say, if Hashem brought us to the desert, Dayenu. If he didn't give us the Torah, Dayenu. So that's what I'm saying, that each one, had Hashem had done each one of those singularly, it is important in its own right.
Wonderful. So just like on Pesach, which is a night about appreciation, we have to express appreciation for every stage and phase. So too, we have to express appreciation for every dimension of creation. And so that gets into, I think, along the lines of what I wanted to suggest to all of you. That this Mishnah, which is highlighting the 10 sayings of God to create the world, why didn't God just use one utterance? The answer is it's to punish the wicked and to reward the righteous. What does that really mean? It's teaching us that we all have to look at the world in which we live. Look how complicated, sophisticated, and intricate the creation is. Every aspect of creation is precious to Hashem. And therefore God paid attention to it. He cared about the details of every dimension of existence. And so he said a different utterance regarding all the different dimensions of creation. Hashem, of course, could have created it with one utterance. But maybe it's to convey to us that we also have to pay attention and feel and express gratitude for every element of the world. I went with my family last week to the beach. Don't worry, we made sure to socially distance from everyone else. And we went to witness the bioluminescent plankton that it creates a beautiful bluish, greenish hue, turquoise hue when the waves come in. And it's just one reminder of the beauty of creation. And it's the grandeur and mystery of the world in which we live. One of my favorite stories, which some of you have heard from me, is the story of Rabbi Salanter with the water in the restaurant. And the waiter gives him a bill for 50 rubles. Mike, you know this one? And Rabbi Salanter says, there must be some mistake. I only ordered a glass of water. And the maitre d' comes over, long story short, and says, Rabbi, don't you understand? When you're here for a glass of water, you don't just pay for the water. You pay for the lighting. You pay for the tables. You pay for the, look at the clientele here. You pay for the ambiance of the restaurant. Rabbi Salanter said, oh, now I understand. Thank you so much for explaining it to me. Now I understand why when I have a simple glass of water, I say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, God, King of the world, Shahakol Niya B'varo, who that everything was created through his utterance, through his 10 utterances. Everything was created. And so when I say a bracha on a simple cup of water, I have to remember the mountains and the rivers and the streams and all the different elements and the human body and the ambiance. We thank Hashem for everything. We thank Hashem for the ambiance of creation. When we say, remember that next time you say the bracha of Shahakol on a cup of water or in anything you say Shahakol on, we're thanking Hashem for the ambiance of creation. And so,
Rabbi,
Shahakol Niya B'dvaro, therefore we have, if God cares about every dimension of the world, we have to care and preserve and demonstrate a responsibility to protect the entire world. And so the Rasha is going to be punished for corrupting the world, and the tzaddik, the righteous person, will be rewarded for elevating it. It wasn't just one utterance, it was 10. God cares about every single dimension. We have to care about it. And so the righteous person and all of us who care about it and elevate it and bring God's presence into the world, so you're going to be rewarded, right, more extensively for protecting all the different dimensions that we appreciate of God's existence. I think there's another idea here. And the other idea here is that the world is in our hands. Bishvili never olam, right? That the world was created for me, for you. Rosh Hashanah is the day of creation of the world. But the rabbis teach us that it's not really the day that the world began to be created, according to tradition, but rather it's the day on which human beings, mankind, was created. If that's the case, why do we say this is the day of the beginning of creation? It really was the 6th day of creation. Right? The rabbis say that really the world began to be created on the 25th of Elul, and Aleph Tishrei was the day of the creation of mankind. So why do we describe it as the beginning of creation? Oh, the answer is because we, all of you, bring significance to the world. The world and all its resources and all its dimensions was created because of you. And you are the ones, through your talents, through your abilities, through your dedication, you bring significance to the world around you. And therefore, guard over every element. And the last parak, we highlighted the inner compass of our character. This parak begins by taking us out into the world to appreciate the different dimensions and then realize that the world was created for me.
You're raising your hand.
Rabbi?
Yes, Mati, I see your hand now.
Okay. I wanted to add, I think that if God would create the world in one ma'amar, it would be, people would say that everything is by chance and nothing was organized the way God wanted to. So this way, when God created the world in 6 days, we see the order. He created this for that and that for this. And at the end, we have the Shabbat that we rest because God rested on the 7th day.
Wonderful. I think that's an excellent answer as well. I love that idea, Mati. Yasha Koach Gadol. Okay, so any other thoughts about that first Mishnah? Right, that it's not by chance, right? And the world is not by chance, and there's a personal divine attention with every element of creation. All right, so that's the idea of the first Mishnah. Last parak took us into the inner character of the Jew. This parak begins by taking us out into seeing the world and appreciating it. Then it speaks about the 10 generations between Adam and Noach. There were 10 generations between Adam and Noach, and there were 10 generations between Noach and Abraham. And this teaches us that God is slow to anger, and that he doesn't punish the people quickly, waited 10 generations, and then he waited 10 generations until Abraham. And then Mishnah Gimel, let me just highlight just a thought quickly about Mishnah Gimel, which is that God tested Abraham 10 different times. Why was it necessary for Hashem to test Abraham with 10 different trials? Asara Nisyonot Nisnasa Avram Avinu Alav Hashalom V'Amad B'Kulam. He was successful and he passed all of them. Why was that necessary? Doesn't God know the righteousness of Abraham? Why was it necessary for Abraham to have a curriculum and to get a report card and to get all these different tests? So the Mishnah says, Lahodia kama chibaso shel Avram Avinu alav hashalom. To teach us how much love that Avram had for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what is this teaching us? Why was it necessary for God to ask Abraham to be willing to give his son to Hashem, which was, according to many commentaries, most commentaries, that was the 10th and final ultimate test. So what the Mishnah is teaching us is that Hashem knows Abraham's commitment. Hashem is testing Abraham not because he's trying to see whether Abraham is righteous, but rather he's testing Abraham to elevate Abraham. He's elevating Abraham. And the Ramban explains that the idea of the different trials was to take that which Abraham had in theory, in potential, and bring it into the actuality. And once it elevated Abraham, and it took it from the potential to the actual, so then it really could reach its ultimate goal. What's the purpose of these tests? A test is a nisayon, right? Nisyonot is a test, nisayon. Nisayon is related to the word nes, which means miracle, because when a human being goes against his instinct and does the right thing even when it's difficult, that is a miracle to celebrate. And so that's why the rabbis connected the splitting of the sea with Yosef resisting his urge, resisting his desire with Mrs. Potiphar. Why? Because it was a miracle for God to split the sea. But in a certain sense, it was a human miracle for Yosef to go against his desire and to do the right thing, and not give in to his desires. But so nisayon relates to the word nes, which is miracle, but also it relates to which word? It relates to which other word? Sa nes lekabitz kol yosenu. What does the word nes mean? It means a banner. So in what way, I want to ask this to the group here, in what way are the tests of Abraham a banner or a flag? Nisayon is related to the word nes, which is miracle, but is related to the word nes, which means a banner or a flag. Sa nes lekabitz kol yosenu. So raise your flag to gather in the exiles. How are the tests a flag or a banner? And the answer is, anyone have a suggestion? You could either send it in with the chat.
I have a suggestion. May I give a suggestion?
Well, you're asking me, Rifki, whether you should give a suggestion.
Yes.
Of course, it's always yes. You're always welcome to give a suggestion.
So my suggestion is that first of all, the nisayon were done for the benefit of Avraham, not for Hashem, because as you say, Hashem knew that he was righteous. It was to prove to Avraham, to himself, that he was righteous, because he needed. It's kind of like an athlete. You run let's say a runner, you run your first, you win it. You run your second, you win it. The more you pass the test, the more confidence you have in yourself and the more confidence you have in your ability to pass the next test. And we all know that when we have struggles and nisayon, however you say nisayonot or nisayonim, I don't know, you grow. And I think this was all for the benefit of Avraham, for him to grow, not only in his understanding of Hashem, but in his understanding of himself and of his own abilities to be the Avraham that Avraham was.
A phenomenal idea. So basically, it wasn't just for Hashem. It wasn't for Hashem to know how righteous Avram was, but rather it was to help Avram elevate himself and gain a better understanding of himself and his abilities. And by passing test after test, it was showing Abraham and giving him a renewed understanding of who he was, what his mission is, and what he could accomplish in his life. And so that's absolutely right. And once it did that, Rifki, what I want to suggest is that it was a flag and a banner, not just for Avram. It was a flag and banner for all generations of Jews. Once Avraham showed that he had that ability, Rifki and all of you, it teaches all Jews of all time who descend from Avraham that we too have that ability to connect, to give of ourselves, to be Moser Nefesh, to give of ourselves in amazing ways for Hashem and for others. And so this notion that the Jew has this concept of being willing to be Moser Nefesh over the course of the generations, where do we get that strength from? Where do we get that ability to continue generation after generation despite the challenges? I'd like to suggest we get it from Avraham. Avraham, it's a banner, it's a flag. He shows us, Hashem tested Avraham for him to grow, to take it from the potential to the actual, but then to teach all future generations that we have the ability to give of ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so whether it's mothers in Israel who have that capacity to send their sons and daughters into Tzahal, right, which is letting their children risk their lives for Am Yisrael, where do we get that strength to risk our lives for Am Yisrael when people put their lives on the line by serving in Tzahal? And Roe Klein, the hero, when the grenade was thrown and the grenade was about to blow up and kill all the members of his unit, and Roe Klein screamed out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and he jumped on the grenade and he gave up his life to save the other members of his unit. Where does that koach come from? It comes from the nisayon, it comes from the nes, it comes from the banner, it comes from Avraham Avinu. And so we have the Asar Ma'amarot Nivra Olam. That's an appreciation of the world. The world is sustained by righteous people like Avraham, who passed the 10 tests. And through that commitment of Avraham, so then you have the miracles. You have the miracles that were done in Egypt. You have the miracles that were done on the sea. You have the miracles that were done, the Makot are the miracles, right? Also, you have the 10 miracles that were done in the Beis Hamikdash, right? In the merit of the commitment that we have, we commit to Hashem. Hashem should provide that commitment and protection of all of us. The last Mishnah, I'm trying to figure out what to learn because I have so much more I want to learn with you. So let's do Mishnah Vav and Zayin. The last Mishnah of the series of 10s. By the way, we find that in Jewish law, in many places, the number 10, right? 10 sayings, 10 commandments, 10 makot, 10 men make a minyan. So Rav Soloveitchik said, and you have here in this perek, right? You have the 10 tests, you have the 10 miracles, you have the 10 utterances. Rav Soloveitchik said, what's the significance of the number 10? So Rav Soloveitchik said that 10 represent the totality of something.
10 fingers, 10 toes.
And I think that's absolutely right. That it's interesting when you have the number, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you go back to 1, right? 11, 12, 13, 14. And same thing with Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. Then you go to Chaf, and then it's Chaf Aleph, Chaf Beis, Chaf Gimel, Chaf Dalet. So why did the number 10 become the unit of counting? So Rivki, you're absolutely right. I think it could be because of the 10 fingers. But Rav Soloveitchik said that the number 10 represents the totality of something. 10 men make a minyan because we represent the Jewish community. 10 plagues represent the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The 10 commandments represent the totality of the 613 mitzvot. The 10 utterances represent the totality of creation. the 10 miracles and the 10 tests, right? Totality of Avram's commitment, etc. 10 represents the totality of whatever it is that we're talking about. The last Mishnah of the sequence of tens is a fascinating Mishnah, which is Mishnah Vav. Hopefully you can see that on your screen there, where we have the Asara Dvarim Nivru Be'erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashot. There were 10 different things that were created the very, very last moment of creation. And it was at that bridge and transition between the 6 days of creation and Shabbat. Ve'eluhain, and what were those things? So, Pia Aretz, that was that the mouth of the land, the mouth of the ground was opened up to swallow up who? To swallow up Korach and his people. Upia Be'er, the mouth of the well, was there to provide what? Water to the Jewish people in the wilderness. That's right. Upia Ason.
That's Bil'am.
Right? You're welcome to take yourself off mute if you want. Upia Ason was with what? With who?
Bil'am.
Bilam, that's right, with Bilam. That Keshet was with the covenant of the rainbow.
Noah.
With Noah. Haman in the wilderness. Hamate, what's the mate?
Moshe.
Sure.
Yeah. Hashamir, what's the shamir?
Dill.
The shamir was this unusual.
The worm.
The shamir was an unusual worm that was used in the building of the Mishkan.
To cut the stones. Yes.
The shamir was used to fashion the stones of the Beit HaMikdash. And the reason is because you're not allowed to use an iron implement or a knife to fashion the stones. The reason is because the stones of the altar were there to provide atonement and length and longevity of life to people, right? On the altar, we would bring sacrifices, which provide an atonement, which lead to longevity of life. And so the halacha is that you can't take an iron implement or an iron instrument or a knife or any iron implement to fashion the stones of the altar, because iron implements are often used as weapons to shorten a person's life. And so, and that's why, by the way, there's a custom at the Shabbat table to take off the knives off the table.
No knife, because that's like a mizbeach.
Right? Why? Because your table is like the altar.
Mizbeach.
At the time of Birchas Hamazon, that's a time that our table becomes like an altar. And so the altar is there to extend our lives, to bring meaning to our lives in this world and extend our lives in the next world. And so we don't want to have knives on the table because those are sometimes used to shorten a person's life if it's used as a weapon. All right, so the shamir was a special worm that, with tradition has it, that was used to, it would travel around the stones and it would fashion the stones for the altar. Okay, hachtav, hamichtav, haluchot, different things relating to the tablets. Okay, and there's a few other things as well. What's going on over here with these 10 things that were created in Bein Hashmashot at that twilight zone, that twilight period between, at the very end of creation? And the Rambam understands, let me see if I could explain this quickly because I want to get to the next Mishnah, which to me is a very, very important Mishnah. But the Rambam explains that this Mishnah, Mishnah Vav, relates to the relationship between nature and miracles. Because on the one hand, we have a concept, Ein Chadash Tachas HaShemesh, right? That God created the world to follow rules of nature. And the rule runs according to the rules of physics and gravity and all the different rules of nature that God embedded into creation. And so, Ein Chadash Tachas HaShemesh, there's nothing new under the sun. On the other hand, we believe in the providence of God and in the possibility of miracles. So how do we understand that relationship, that dynamic between nature and miracles? And the Rambam says like this. The Rambam says that when God created the world on the 6 days, he implanted within creation, within the code of creation, the ability for these things to sometimes change in the future. according to the Rambam, he understands that God created everything on the 6 days of creation. According to many, many opinions, yeah, God created the rules of nature, but of course, God is involved actively in nature throughout history. And according to the Rambam agrees with that as well. God remains actively involved in history, and God is aware of the midst of the actions that we do. But the Rambam's opinion is that when Hashem created the world, he created rules of nature, but during that creation, he already implanted in there the capacity of certain things to change at certain times, which then becomes the supernatural, would then become miracles for the Jewish people or for the world. And it was all already implanted in the 6 days of creation. So it's really not altering nature, because according to the Rambam, it's part of nature. Ein chadash tachas Hashem. There's nothing new in nature, because everything is part of nature. Just certain things happen in unusual supernatural ways at specific moments because God willed it to be that from the very, very beginning of time.
He predid.
So you have natural and supernatural, and that's right. So, but these 10 things in this Mishnah, however, these are exceptions to the rule, where God created them as independent items that were then going to be activated at a particular time in history. All the other things, so for example, the splitting of the sea, that's not found in this Mishnah. Why? Because when God created the sea, God implanted within the sea the capacity to split thousands of years later when the Jews were crossing, and then to return to its normal flow to punish the Egyptians. The Makot, right? The different plagues are not included in this list here, because when God, right, created the land, he implanted within the earth the ability that at a future point in time it'll create lice, kinim, to punish the Egyptians. So that's with the majority of the miracles that took place over history. God implanted it within the nature of existence from the very beginning. This list, however, is an exceptional list of 10 items where God created it as an independent item. Why? So the Meiri gives the following explanation. The Meiri says because these items are specifically for the reward and punishment of individuals created on day 6. These specific miracles are to either reward or punish human beings that were created right before these things were created. So in a certain sense, these things were created to relate to the human beings that were created on day 6. However, the Meiri gives another explanation where he says that these were the things that were necessary for the survival and success of the Jewish people. And that's why, because of God's care specifically for the Jewish people, God has an additional level of providence and relationship with us. He created these things specifically because they relate to the survival and success of the Jewish people. Each of the answers, the question is, what about Kriyas Yamsuf? So we're going to leave that for now, but those are a couple different explanations. According to the Rambam, he understands this Mishnah as really taking us into the distinction between nature and miracles, and that these 10 things are actually exceptional miracles, different than all other miracles. And then the question is why? I just gave you 2 different interpretations. Let's, for the last several minutes of the Shiur, I want to learn this last Mishnah, or at least the last Mishnah of tonight. So now we've learned the sequence of 10, right? Appreciating the world. We have to be, right? The world is sustained by righteous people like Abraham. And through that commitment, we merit the 10 miracles and the 10 miracles in different dimensions, and also these 10 things that were created on Erev Shabbat. Now the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot goes into 7 different identifying factors of a Chacham. You have Stephen Covey's 7 different factors of success in this world, or the 7 habits, right? What is Stephen Covey? The 7 habits of successful people. So here, hold on one second. I see here a couple of comments. Let's see, what's the chat say? Accomplishments agreed with the, okay. That was from previous, okay. Shiva Dvarim Bagola, Mishnah Zayin. You see it there?
Yes.
The Shiva
Yes.
B'chacham. So this Mishnah is now taking us to the distinction between a wise person and a golem. What's a golem? All right, we know about the Maral's alleged golem, but golem really means an uncultivated person. Golem in the world of utensils means incomplete or not finished. So in this Mishnah, golem means someone who has a stunted moral development and who's not a refined personality. And a chacham is someone who not only has knowledge, but he knows how to process that knowledge, and he knows how to deal with that knowledge. And let's learn through this Mishnah. I think it's a very, very powerful Mishnah, which I think is sorely needed in our current political climate. We live in an age now where people have trouble listening to one another and providing space to each other, and the whole notion of nuance and that things are not black on white is kind of lost a little bit or a lot today. Listen to this Mishnah, and with this Mishnah we'll end. Shiva Dvarim Bagolam Shiva B'chacham. And so it lists 7 different characteristics of a wise person, and the golem is the person who doesn't have these 7 things. Okay? So Shiva Dvarim Bagolam.
Chacham.
No, Shiva Dvarim Bagolam v'Shiva B'chacham. Chacham eino medaber b'fnei mishu hu gadol mimenu b'chachmo v'minyan. So the first thing is that a chacham has a certain sense of humility. He doesn't speak before someone who's greater than him, and he has the humility to understand that somebody might have more knowledge and more expertise than him. Ve'eino nichnas l'toch divrei chavero. And he doesn't, trying to get it to be green here. I can't do it. Okay, there we go. He doesn't interrupt his friend when he or she is speaking. He doesn't rush to respond. And so these 3 things, I think, are relating to what's the purpose of your knowledge? Is the purpose of your knowledge to build your brand or for self-glory? Or is it for the pursuit and acquisition of truth for the sake of heaven? So a person who doesn't interrupt the words of his friends and who doesn't rush to give his answer, so if it's all about self-image, then I want to speak first, and I want to shout out and interrupt my friend, and I'm going to rush to respond to give a comeback. I'm going to respond as quickly as possible. However, if our pursuit of knowledge is for the right reasons, and we just want to pursue and achieve truth, so then we're going to listen to the other person. We're not going to interrupt the other person who's speaking, and we're going to want to process the information first before we give our suggestion. And the very first teaching in Pirkei Avot is Havi Metuna Medin, that you should be deliberate in judgment. Eino niva lahashiv means behilu, panicking. Don't panic. You don't have to respond right away. Don't rush to give an answer. I have to consider this issue carefully, and I'll get back to you. Let me think about this issue before I respond. V'omer al harishon rishon. Shoal ke'inyan u'meshav k'halacha means you ask relevant questions and you respond in relevant ways. In other words, you're not grandstanding. You're not just going to ask questions and give answers that are not relevant. Shoal ke'inyan u'meshav k'halacha. So the first thing is you don't speak before someone with greater expertise. Second thing is that you don't interrupt. Third thing is that you don't answer quickly. Fourth thing is Shoal ke'inyan u'meshav k'halacha is you ask relevant questions and you give relevant answers. Which means that you answer after the first thing first, and after the second thing second, which means you build a foundation.
Order.
This is relating to what was said earlier, I think by Rivki, which is that you have to build and develop the creation like God did. And we have to build and develop a process of thought and understand the principles and then build upon that. And the last two things are the most interesting or most powerful in my view, which is Ve'al masha lo shama, omer lo shamati. If a person hasn't heard something, he says, I haven't heard about it. And so this is the ability for a person to say, I don't know the answer. I mean, imagine if you were in a debate. It's a presidential debate, or it's a news program, and where a person says, you know what? My opponent is making a good point. I think I'll have to concede about this issue. I mean, we would be astonished if we were watching a debate where somebody said, you know what, I think I'm incorrect. And I hear what the other person is saying. Because the point is to score points and to win the debate without necessarily a regard for truth. And so what this is saying over here is that a person could say, you know what, I want to think that over. I haven't thought about that. You're raising important points. Umoda ala emes, and you admit the truth. If really you come to a conclusion that you're wrong, you're able to admit the truth. People think it's a sign of wisdom to never admit you're wrong. No, what this mission is saying is that it's a sign of wisdom to admit that you're wrong and to admit the other person is right when it's appropriate. When Aaron presents an argument to Moshe, right after his two sons died, and Moshe comes and he says, Aaron, how could you have offered the karban without eating it? And Moshe was angry. I thought I told you that you have to continue the sacrificial service even though you lost two of your sons. And Aaron says, yes, there were certain sacrifices that I offered and we ate from, but certain sacrifices, I'm not going to get bogged down by the details right now. There's certain sacrifices, what? You want me to just go on as if it's normal, as if nothing happened to me? And the pasuk says, Vayita be'enav, that Moshe Rabbeinu agreed to the argument of Aaron. Moshe Rabbeinu was willing to say, he was willing to be moda ala emes, he was willing to agree that Aaron was correct. Rashi does this sometimes also, where he says, ani lo yodea. Right? Rashi says, I don't know the meaning of this word or this pasuk. And we have a machlokas between Hillel and Shammai. Who do we follow? We follow Hillel. The Gemara says the reason is because Hillel was nochen v'aluvim. They were kind, they were easygoing, and they quoted the position of Beit Shammai before presenting their own. And I think it's just an incredible thing that this Mishnah is teaching us, which is that we have to be like a wise person, and the wise individual, the one who's truly wise, is the one who takes time to process the information, who doesn't rush to a conclusion and doesn't rush to interrupt anyone else. And I see that everyone's careful not to interrupt me when I say that. So, but you're all welcome. You're all welcome to interrupt me. It's within reason. But you have to take care to process the information. You have to make sure not to interrupt another person when he's talking. You have to ask relevant questions and give relevant answers. And not just, give off 10 and 20 things to show how impressive your knowledge is. And to say, if you don't know, to say, I didn't realize that. Let me give that a second thought. I don't know the answer to your question. Let me get back to you. These are some kinds of expressions. I don't know about you. I don't hear this. I don't watch the news too much, but you don't hear this on news programs. You don't really hear this in presidential debates or any panel discussions when you're watching online usually, because it's all about the quick comeback. And it's all about the proving you're right and insisting that I'm right no matter any arguments that are sent my way. And a person who's truly wise appreciates someone who has greater knowledge and understands that, you know what, there's nuance and things are not black and white. We had the pleasure years ago to have Yehuda Avner in our community. I had the great privilege of joining Yehuda Avner for a personal lunch on a couple of occasions. And I remember one story that he told me in one of our lunches, Ambassador Yehuda Avner, author of the Prime Ministers, because I told him that I studied at Gush, where my Rebbe was Rabbi Yehuda Amital. And Rabbi Yehuda Amital was actually in the government for a short period of time. And so Yehuda Avner told me that I think it was Yitzchak Rabin who told Avner that I want you to help out Rav Amital, like serve as an advisor and provide support to Rav Amital, who again was a minister without portfolio in the government for a short period of time. And so Yehuda Avner shared with me that he overheard a conversation between Rav Yehuda Amital and some of the other religious Zionist ministers. And in the Chama, I see your hand, if I could just finish the story. And Rav Amital was so upset at the religious Zionist ministers for not recognizing that there's different dimensions and there's nuances that you have to consider. And Rav Amital screamed out and said, "Atem lo mevinim et hanuansim." So Yehuda Avner was sharing with me this story that he remembered about Yehuda Amital, which is that he was conveying that there's nuance. Not everything is black on white. And there's two sides to an issue. And yes, you have to show leadership and you have to express conviction of things we believe in. There are things that are black and white. There are times that we're right and the other person is wrong, no doubt. But what this Mishnah is teaching us something counterintuitive, which is that it's a mark of wisdom when you process the information and that you can say, I don't know, and you can say, you know what, let me think about that and get back to you. Yen Nechama, go ahead.
I didn't have a question. I don't know how it raised my hand.
Okay. All right. So that concludes this year. I think Perek K is just an amazing Perek. It's 10, it's 7, it's 4, and then it's other Mishnayot. And I think it's really a blueprint for us in terms of appreciating the world, developing a relationship with Hashem, but also creating space for Hashem, but also creating space for others. And if we do that, that's really, if we live life with that sense of wisdom, with that sense of broad-mindedness, you know, that's something that really we can achieve the true goal of, I think, Lag BaOmer, right? Lag BaOmer, which is that we could turn things around, show greater respect for one another, and of course, strengthen always our commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Shakor.
Thank you all so much.
Koach, Rabbi,
Thank you.
Toda Rabba.
Thank you.
Toda Rabba.
Have
So
a good
good.
rest of the week.
Rabbi, is he still on? Rabbi?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Fran Feynman. I'm from the Victor family, and they were original founders of Beth Jacob when it was on West Adams, and very good friends with Rabbi Dogan. And so I go back a long way with Beth Jacob. I was very impressed with your teaching tonight. I enjoyed it very much, and you're terrific.
You are terrific, Rabbi.
Just terrific.
Thank you so much for your kind words, and that's so beautiful to hear about your family's long-standing
In
relationship.
fact, we had a classroom dedicated at Beth Jacob to my grandmother. I don't know if it's still there. Ida Victor.
What's your name again? Is Fran?
My name is Fran Feynman, but the family name is Victor, Vickter. And there was a kindergarten classroom, I think, in memory of Ida Victor downstairs.
Yes.
It was many years ago.
Yes.
And Rabbi Dogan many years ago performed my marriage ceremony, and we go back a long way.
Beautiful, beautiful. So nice that you're able, so nice of that long-standing.
And I live in the neighborhood, and I think I'm going to be a little bit more active because I think you're terrific.
Thank you, Fran, for your kind words.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. All right, everyone. Thank you so much
Laila
for joining.
Tov.
Thank you.
Laila Tov, everyone.
Thank you,
all
Rabbi.
so much for joining. Okay, all the very
Thank
best.
you. Rabbi, you're truly a no nivhal lahashiv. You truly are.
That's so sweet of you, Miriam.
True.
Such a wonderful person.
That's one of the things that can ruin relationships in today's world.
Yep.
Too many people are not a no nivhal lahashiv. They answer quickly, they answer without thinking, and very often there goes the relationship. It can truly happen.
You have a very nice mannerism, very calm and very nice. I like it. Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran, so much for your kindness.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate your
It's from the heart,
kind words. Thank you.
from the neshama.
And
Thank
so we
you.
hope to see you on Zoom, and we'll see you hopefully when we get back to
Yes.
Shul as well, Fran. We'll get your
Do
family
you
back.
meet
to
every
Shul.
week? Do you meet every week?
Yeah, we
on
meet
Zoom?
every week, but you know, you want to get the Shul emails, but yeah, we'll meet next week at 8 o'clock again.
Okay, I'll be there with God's help.
Okay, all the very
Thank
best. Julie, Esther, Stephanie, Rachel,
Thank you.
Avi, Linda, Miriam, David, Shelley. Shelley might be my mom. All the very best to everyone. Lila Tov, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, Rabbi. Goodbye. Good. God bless.
Be well. Stay healthy and well, everyone.
How much time?